Our philosophy, natto, non-attachment to the outcome, is young and ever developing. Every now and then I have a change in its perspective or some new concept to share with you. And today is one of those days. I have a very actually fundamental concept that I am really, really excited to share with you. And it is SiPho, or signal phobias. This is something that's been marinating in my brain for at least 6 months. I've shared this with one-on-one with clients or in our immunity program. But I think this concept is ready to be shared, with the broader community here, and I think it's going to be a real nice addition to our teachings. And happy Thanksgiving, by the way. If you if you live stateside and you celebrate it, I just want to say happy Thanksgiving as well. Hope it was a nice week time for you. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump in. This is actually going to be episode 1. So we're going to talk about signal phobia, or SiPhos, here. And this is going to be episode 1. And there's going to be episode 2 next Monday, where we go into like the classification of them, which I think is going to be really, really helpful. This sounds a little bit like, if you're in this struggle now, this may not be where you want to start. But if you have some understanding of the basics, I think there's going to be so much value here in this episode and the next one. So anyway, this is episode 1. And in this episode, we're going to talk about what this is, the definition. What is a signal phobia? What's a SiPho? Why does this matter so much? And I really think it does. And what to do, when we are in this like SiPho situation. How do we meet that? That's going to be topic for today. So yes, let's start with number 1. What is a SiPho? And as I was preparing this, I realized we kind of actually have to look at the psi and the pho individually. We have to look at what is a signal and what is a phobia, and then we can put them together and understand what a SiPho is before we go to see why this matters so very much. So yeah, we're going to start with the first part of the SiPho. What is a signal? What do I mean when I talk about a signal? Well, let's start here. Every human experience, yes, every single human experience actually can be thought of as a signal or a message. So super, super broad, every single experience, right? What do I mean by this? Well, when we become aware of something, that is a signal to the aware brain, to the conscious brain from another part. Call it the subconscious or call it whatever we want. But when we become aware of something, there has been a signal. And this can be like something external, like hearing a bird sing, or smelling something, or anything that we perceive with our 5 senses that we become aware of is a signal. And why do I keep saying this? Well, it is because the reality is that if we weren't aware, then there would have been no signal. In other words, let me pause here a little bit and say the following: that if you imagine kind of like the human existence, we are constantly taking in things. Like we're seeing things, hearing things, smelling things, feeling things. Not only that, we have like internal experiences as well. We're thinking things, we're feeling things, and if we were consciously aware of everything, that would just be completely like overwhelming for us, right? So the brain constantly decides what it should make us aware of, what signal or message to present to us to make us aware of. So this is why I say that every single thing, every single human experience is a signal, because by definition you became aware of it. It means the brain thought this is important enough that this should be made aware. This should reach consciousness, if you will. So this is the broad definition of a signal. And I already mentioned this actually, that signals not only have kind of an external origin, like things we perceive with our senses, if you will, but they can have an internal origin, a thought, for example, or an emotion that we become aware of. That is a signal that came from within, if you will. So with that said, we have looked at what signals are, or I use signal and message interchangeably. Sometimes one of them I think is more helpful than the other, but I really think of them as the same thing. So now we thought about signals. So then we go to the second part here, which is, what is a phobia? What is a phobia? Well, I picked one definition from online. Is a strong irrational fear of something that poses little or no real danger. We're afraid of something that actually in reality cannot hurt us. We can be afraid of balloons or spiders or things like that. Very common, but they're actually harmless. And then this second thing I picked from the American Psychological Association, or APA's website. When people are fearful of something, they tend to avoid the feared objects, activities, or situations. Although this avoidance might help reduce feelings of fear in the short term, over the long term, it can make the fear become even worse. So this is, in my mind, how what we call a phobia develops. We can randomly become afraid of something, like a spider. We see someone, for some reason, we become a little frazzled, which is just very natural, right? But then we start to avoid the spider, and it was like, oh, I can't see spiders. I can't see insects. That makes me scared. Like, I don't want to see them at all. And although short term, it can feel like good, like, oh, I didn't see a spider. In reality, what this does is it teaches our brain that, oh, spiders really are dangerous. You should avoid them, right? So the avoidance teaches our brain that there is a danger. And then we have this kind of escalating fear. We have more and more and more fear. And this can like really, really affect our daily lives, you know? So that's how I see a phobia. And now we can put these things together and answer the question of what is a SiPho? What is signal phobia? What is a signal phobia? Well, really, I think of it as this. It's just extending the concept of a phobia to all signals, all possible signals, external or internal, right? So to give you kind of more sense of where I'm going with this, I listed a few of the very common struggles we have. And one is the struggle with general anxiety. This, to me, I think of this as a SiPho, signal phobia, where the signal is the emotion that we call anxiety. So we have become afraid of an internal signal, and the more we try to avoid that, for the reasons we discussed above, the more intense that signal becomes. The more we experience it. Or insomnia is a SiPho, where the signal is the awareness of being awake. We become aware of being awake, and that starts to frighten us, and we become more and more scared of that signal, and the more struggle we have. Racing thoughts, we can look at as a SiPho, where the signal is an uncomfortable thought. Or feeling depressed, we can think of as a SiPho, where the signal is the emotion that we call sadness. And as you probably get a sense of as I'm going through this, like, again, like every internal struggle that we have, I think can be classified as a signal phobia. We just have to identify what exactly is the signal that we are scared of. All right. And now, if it isn't already clear, like, I think next step for us is to talk about, like, why does this matter so much? Well, first of all, we already talked about like the scope. It's like SiPho is like really, really, the scope is like huge, right? So I think that can be an indicator that it can be really helpful to know about and could be important. But I also want to point this out, that the quote unquote establishment, like the kind of traditional way we meet phobias, let's say, in this establishment, it is very, like these phobias, when it comes to the external things, are very well understood. The establishment knows how to meet a traditional phobia like arachnophobia, which is a fear of spiders. The establishment knows that exposure therapy is the way. It is not trying to avoid spiders, but rather actually exposing ourselves to them. The establishment knows that this is how we meet, phobias, right? But the quote-unquote establishment tells us to meet SiPhos like anxiety, like the struggle with anxiety, with what? How does the establishment, quote-unquote, tell us that we should meet a SiPho like, struggles with anxiety? Well, basically, they tell us that it is avoidance, right? The establishment, whether this is like, this, within psychological space or the medical space or the wellness space, think of it how you will. And by the way, there's so much, there's so much variety. So, there may be people out there in the traditional space with great understanding. But anyway, I'm kind of lumping things together as the establishment here, and saying that the establishment, in a way, tells us to meet SiPhos with avoidance, with like, take this and it will make it go away. Exercise more and it will go away. Do this to make it go away. They basically tell us to meet the phobias with SiPhos with avoidance, which we know actually is why we have them in the first place. this is what leads to more struggle. Well, really, this is why I think this matters so much, because I think it can really explain why we have like more and more, we have, I think, more and more actually access to like, counseling and even medications and supplements and wellness advice and things. Like we have more and more access to this, but we also have, I think, more and more growing struggles with these, emotions and thoughts and things of that nature. And I think this explains why, because of this misunderstanding. All right. And the other thing, the other reason I thought this matters is the SiPho concept. It simplifies our understanding of all the inner struggles, and I think if you look at generally in like science, like the development of science is all about simplification, making things like easily understandable. That's kind of like that's where it's helpful when things go. And so I think it's helpful to simplify things, to make things easier, right? But then you may wonder, like, but is it true? Like, is this just something Daniel is making up? Like, or is there really something here? And I ponder this a lot. And the way I think about this is like, there are many hypotheses and ideas out there, right? For example, gravity. Scientists, to my understanding, have actually not proven that, like, proven the hypothesis of gravity. Some are still looking for like these gravitons, these small particles that can explain how it happens. People like scientists haven't really fully understood gravity, right? It's still like a hypothesis, but it works so well, right? The model, the hypothesis of gravity, it works so nicely that I think it's, we can just adapt it, and we can, we can do great things like land on the moon based on our understanding of a concept that we haven't fully proven yet, right? So I think of the same thing as we talk about here, like the SiPho, that how do you prove that this is true? I don't know, but I think it's more about if we just apply this model to things that we see happening around us, and we find that, oh yeah, this makes sense. This makes so much sense. Then maybe it's not possible or even important to like prove it. Just like with gravity, we can adapt it. We can adapt it and see where it leads us. And that, I think, is the way I meet that question of like, is it true? And then finally, of course, like what to do. Okay. And this is not going to be very long because many of you probably recognize these teachings. I just haven't presented them as a SiPho before. But that said, again, I think it's so helpful to think of the internal struggles that we have as kind of like they happen when we are afraid of something that's harmless. We're afraid of a thought or an emotion or an experience, right? So any way, any approach that we deploy to become like more willing to receive the signal, right? Receive the message instead of trying to avoid it, that will reduce our fear of something that is actually harmless, right? So how can we do that? Well, I put down 3 things here, but A is like be willing to experience it in the moment. Sounds very fleeting and non-practical, but what I mean by that is kind of like, okay, when we have like this worry thought that pops up for the nth time, or we're feeling really anxious, then at that very moment, go towards like, okay, I'm willing to have that thought right now. I'm willing to experience this in this very moment. I think that can be very helpful. B is to write things down. If we think about the signals as messages again, we can see that it's sort of like when a friend is trying to warn us of something. The more we don't want to hear it, the more our friend who loves us wants to like really amplify that message. So if we just take some time during the day and write down these signals, whatever we're struggling with, we just put it down on paper. It can be a way to just show our brain that it was heard, the message was received, and that can be really helpful. Do that, pick like a few minutes every day to do that. That can really help. Or C here is kind of imagine the outcome the brain wants to warn us about. And this is helpful when we have like concrete things. The brain is telling us like, this is going to happen. You're not going to be able to function tomorrow. This is going to happen. Then we can just imagine that. We can imagine that, okay, I'm going to imagine myself tomorrow not quote unquote able to function. And this doesn't mean that we have to be like okay with that outcome. Not at all, but just be okay with the message. Be okay with the fact that we're receiving this message. Okay. Imagining the signal play out, if you will, is a strong way of showing the brain that I'm willing to hear the message, right? So I'll conclude here for today. Let me know in the comment section if this made sense, what you thought about this concept. And then next week, we're going to go deeper into like classifying SiPhos. And I think you'll find that super, super interesting and hopefully helpful too. So yeah, we'll conclude there. And as always, if you find the concepts presented here helpful and you are arriving where you want to be, place of peaceful sleep and peace of mind, that is wonderful. If you find that it is tricky and you'd like some more guidance on your path there, then definitely head over to our website, check out our coaching options. If you decide to join, we look forward to seeing you on the inside. That said, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and look forward to having you back soon. Bye for now.